There was a time when Gore Canyon stood there, right? Just like a loaded gun. And you had two different groups of men who were trying to get their hands on that trigger. And, that's the part that I think people can just easily pass over. Today, when you look at that stretch of the upper Colorado River and you see beauty, right? You see rafting water, you see canyon walls and fast current and that just clean Colorado feeling where the sun hits the rock just right and everything looks wild in a very noble kind of way. But that is not the whole story. You see, because before this was river country romance, it was a fight. And I mean a real one. Not a bar fight, not some miners just jawing at each other in the dust. I mean a fight over what the canyon itself was actually going to become. You see, one side looked into Gore Canyon and they saw a dam, right? Power, stored water, control. And the other side, it looked into that same black stone throat and saw railroad tracks, steel, expansion, a route west, right? Same canyon, same river, two completely different futures. And that's why I just love stories like this, because they remind you that the mountains, they're not just scenery, okay? They're an old battleground of human ambition. And every now and then, you find a place where the land itself became the argument. And Gore Canyon was exactly that. Now, I want you to try to picture it the way it would have felt back then, right? You got no boat ramps buzzing with that weekend traffic from Denver. You got no dry bags, no coolers, no families laughing at the put-in. Just a really hard corridor of rock and river, narrow in places, mean-looking, isolated. It's the kind of country where a man could feel brave for about 10 minutes and then suddenly understand that he had entered a place that just didn't give a damn if he ever came back out. That was the prize. That there was the thing that both sides wanted. And by the early 1900s, that tension had gotten real enough that camps had formed on opposite sides of the river. I want you to think about that image, right? Men sleeping, working, smoking, cussing, cooking, staring across the current at the other side. And each camp carrying a completely different idea for the future of the canyon. Well, power interests were on one side, railroad men on the other, and the whole place, it just must have felt like a fuse burning towards something. And that alone is already a great story. But then it got even bigger because, this wasn't settled by some local handshake in a dusty room, okay? The matter actually rose all the way up high enough that President Theodore Roosevelt himself, he got involved. And Roosevelt ended up making the absolute final call. And that was that the railroad would go through Gore Canyon. So just like that, one future lived and the other one died. Now, that sounds neat when you say it fast, okay? The railroad would go through. Simple sentence, right? Just clean sentence. But out there in the real world, okay, there was absolutely nothing clean about what was going on. Because saying that a railroad should go through Gore Canyon, that's one thing. But actually forging it through that canyon, that's something else completely entirely different. And that's where this story starts to get a little knuckles. You see, in 1906, the Railroad Survey began by anchoring ropes and logs in the canyon to make bridges. Man, that line right there ought to stop a man in his tracks. Ropes, logs, bridges in Gore Canyon. Not on some gentle meadow, not across a sleepy little creek. No, in a canyon that even now has a reputation that makes people pay attention, you can almost see it. Men clinging to ledges, timbers creaking, the river noise just pounding up off the bottom, cold mountain air, splinters in their palms. You got boots slipping on broken stone, and survey lines stretched where there was no civilized thing that had any business being stretched. So a whole crew of human beings trying to invent a path through a place that looked at them as if they were intruders. And that's the thing about old Western infrastructure, is because we talk about it like it was destiny, right? Like the railroad was always going to happen. Like history rolled west in a straight line and then the iron simply followed behind. Nah. In country like this, a railroad was actually a literal assault on the geography. A brutal negotiation between man and stone. I mean, every foot had to be taken, measured, hung, dragged, blasted. It had to be earned the ugly way. And what I like about this story is that it just strips the polish off of the word progress. Because progress, it just sounds so clean when you say it in a warm room. Out there, it looked like rope burns and fear and bad footing and shouted orders and men gambling their bodies against a canyon wall because somebody with a vision and money, well, they had decided that this route mattered. And that's what it really was. It was not smooth. It was not poetic. It was just rough and loud, dangerous work in a place that was built to resist it. And then in September of 1907, the railroad was completed through Gore Canyon and actually reached McCoy. And that was the moment that the argument, well, it turned solid. Steel in the canyon, right? Decision made permanent. The railroad had won. And once you know that, you can't really look at this stretch of river, the same way again, because, Gore Canyon, it stops being just a dramatic backdrop. It actually becomes a decision point in Colorado history. One of those places where the future narrowed down to a choke point, and you had men who fought over what the river was for. Was it supposed to be stopped and harnessed, or pierced and passed through? That was the question. And, the answer, it still echoes through that entire corridor, okay? Even places nearby, right? Like radium. They carry the fingerprints from that same area. Radium's history, it ties directly into the railroad. And later, it even got its unusual name from the radioactivity found in, what was his name? Harry Porter's mine. So the whole corridor has that quality that I love most, where one story, it never really stands alone, okay? You pull on one thread, and then the whole riverbank starts talking. And that's what makes the Upper Colorado so damn good. It smiles at you first. Then it starts telling you what it cost. And Gore Canyon, to me, okay, is one of the best examples of that anywhere on that run. Beautiful now, sure. But underneath that beauty is an older tension, right? A harder story. You got men staring into that canyon and they see profit, power, and passage, destiny, and they risk all of it at once. So the next time you're up there, okay, the next time you're floating that country and you're looking into the darker pull of the canyon, remember this. Gore Canyon, it was almost something else. And the version that we inherited, it came out of a fight. So if you like digging into the buried history of the Upper Colorado, you guys subscribe because, the deeper that we go into this river corridor, okay, the rougher and stranger the stories are going to get. So hit that notification bell, give this thing a like, drop a comment down below if you guys have spent much time on the upper sea, and we'll see you on the next one. And don't forget, ColoradoRiverExpeditions.com. We'll get you out there and show you the best time on the water.